The NBA season is just getting started here in October, but if you're like me, actually, it kind of snuck up on you a little bit. So you may have no idea what's going on. Or maybe you do. That's great. But either way, you should stick around because we've got a whole season preview to get through on this edition of Zander's Facts. That's right, y'all. It is time for our annual Zander's Facts NBA season preview with our very own NBA analyst, Hillbilly. The man himself is returning to Zander's Facts as we begin yet another season of just wonderful professional basketball analysis. On this episode, we preview all 30 teams in the association. We determine who is going to make it to the postseason. And then, of course, at the end, we predict who is going to win the championship in June at the end of the season. Plus, we've also got, some pretty major facts sprinkled in along the way that you are not going to want to miss. It is Zander's Facts episode 141, and just a note for those of you watching on YouTube or on zandersfacts.com, the rest of this episode is audio only. Speaking of audio, just wanted to say up front that my audio didn't turn out so well on this episode. Hillbilly's did. Hillbilly's was fine. Mine was a bit of a mess. Not sure why. I do apologize, though. Don't blame me. I guess it was my fault, but I don't know. I don't know how it happened. It won't happen again. Either way, it is time for our 2024-2025 NBA season preview. Let's get to the facts.
Zander's Facts.
It is October, believe it or not. It's actually the middle of October, which is kind of insane to think about. This fall has kind of gone on so fast. But that means October means it is basketball time. And here at Zander's Facts, we like to do a little thing called previewing the NBA season with our Zander's Facts NBA analyst, Hillbilly. Hillbilly is back here on Zander's Facts for our 141st episode. Hillbilly, how are you?
Well, I think it's still senior NBA analyst, unless I was demoted.
I wanted to address that because
no.
This is this is good. This is good. This is our 5th year doing this, if you can believe it. This is our 5th NBA season that we're now talking about basketball and the facts. And so Hillbilly was our NBA analyst, and then he became our senior NBA analyst. So I am proposing right now that we promote Hillbilly to our chief NBA analyst.
Wow.
Do you think you can handle it? Number one.
Yeah. It doesn't come. Well, I was going to ask it. Make sure it doesn't come with less pay, but I don't think that's possible. So.
Well, you know what? If you can bring some advertisers to the podcast, you can start making a salary.
Oh, fair enough.
I don't want to hear about it if you're not going to contribute. Okay, so don't even. So our chief NBA analyst, Hillbilly, is back on the podcast. He's accepted the promotion as we are previewing the 2024-2025 National Basketball Association season. If you all will recall from last year, the Boston Celtics ended up winning the NBA championship for the 18th time. That is a record. And, we did a podcast that previewed the playoffs before the playoffs began, Hillbilly. I'm pretty sure that one of us on this podcast picked the Celtics to win the whole thing on that podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
I think one of us did. That's true.
I think I know which one of us it was too, and it wasn't our chief NBA analyst. So
I probably picked the Nuggets or the Bucks.
No,
I know I didn't pick the Bucks.
Yeah, I remember you were down on the Bucks. Down on the Bucks. That's one of the things we're going to get into. We'll see Hillbilly's stance on the Bucks. I'm not sure it's too high right now, but we'll get into that. We are going to talk about all 30 teams, and there's a lot to talk about as the season tips off on Tuesday, October 22nd. Let's get straight to it. We are talking NBA basketball. We are also, at the end of this podcast, going to pick our teams 1 through 8 standings at the end of the year, and of course our NBA Finals matchup and winner of the NBA championship, just so y'all can come back and say facts were made on this podcast. But Hillbilly, let's start out in the Eastern Conference. Let's go by the standings from last year. Let's just talk about these last 5 teams that were in the Eastern Conference. You had Detroit, the Pistons, who had the worst season for any team in a while. They had the longest single season losing streak in the history of the NBA last year. They lost 28 straight games. The Wizards only won one more game than the Pistons. The Hornets, Michael Jordan is no longer their owner. The Raptors are down there, and the Nets are down there too, as those 5 teams that totally missed the playoffs, didn't even make the play-in. Not sure if we have much better hope for any of these teams this year, Hillbilly. It's kind of the way the East shakes out. I don't really think I see any movement upward for any of these 5 teams, honestly.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't think if anybody was going to make a jump into like maybe the play-in area, so like the 10th or the ninth spot, I would say that it would probably be the Hornets, just because I mean last year they were without LaMelo Ball for pretty much the entire year. The rookie that they drafted last year outperformed, and you got to think that he's going to get even better this year.
Brandon Miller.
Yeah, Brandon Miller. And Miles Bridges had his problems last year, which, I think we probably most people would take some exception to Miles Bridges and his behavior, but he's still like kind of a borderline all-star talent. Mark Williams is also another great young player that they have that missed pretty much all of last year that hopefully will be back soon for the Hornets. You put all that stuff back together, and I mean, that's actually not that bad of a team. I mean, LaMelo Ball is a really good player. He's just been stuck on really bad teams for a while. So, wouldn't be surprising to see them make a jump. But like the Wizards, this Wizards team could wind up being one of the worst teams ever. If it could be, I could see them being setting the record. They really just don't have anybody left. They're paying a ton of money to Jordan Poole, who it's actually probably money well spent, because under the new CBA, you have to spend a certain amount of money or you get fined for that. So you have to soak up that salary, and Washington doesn't want to pay anybody that's going to be good and accidentally win games. So they spend all this money on Jordan Poole, who is like a one-man tanking machine, a high volume 3-point shooter that can't hit him, like he just wastes every possession. So I think they could be historically bad, which might be interesting to watch on its own.
That's okay. So the worst season in NBA history, the worst winning percentage, 0.106, belongs to the Charlotte Bobcats of 2012. That was the lockout shortened season, so they went 7-59. But in an 82 game season, the worst record was in 1973 by the Sixers, 9-73.
Ooh, that's tough.
I mean, just 9 games.
Yeah, I think they could. I think they could, but I'd have to admit that's probably pretty unlikely. That's pretty bad.
That's winning about 1 out of every 10 of your games. I mean,
but they really, I mean, the only like player they have on their team that other teams would really want is Kuzma, and I bet they trade him this year. But on the flip side, though, they've got some young talent coming up. Bilal Coulibaly was their draft pick last year. He actually looked pretty good. Alex Sarr, despite having, I think it was the worst summer league game of all time. I think he went 0 for 17 from the field, I think, which is really an impressive display of futility there. But he's actually looked better in the preseason. They've got some good young players. I think they're doing the right thing, but yeah, they're going to be horrible this year.
That's awesome. I'm so happy about that. Um, so we can move on from the worst teams. How about these next couple teams in the East? This is where it starts to get interesting. So last year we had the Hawks at 10th. They went 36-46 and they lost in the play-in. And they wound up with the first pick in the draft, Zachary Rizachet, the second straight Frenchman who was drafted number 1 overall. We'll talk about the other one from the past year in a little bit, I think, out in the West. The Bulls at 9, they kind of blew it up. We can talk about that. The Heat in 8. I gotta be honest. You know me and my Heat, but I'm kind of just like, what are they gonna do? I mean, Jimmy Butler's 35 years old. They have the same roster they do last year.
They still haven't extended Jimmy Butler, and he is publicly demanding his extension. Pat Riley called him out, saying he basically didn't want to pay him if he was going to play like that. Yeah, it's a tough start, but they're the Heat. Who knows?
They won the Summer League title.
Yeah. So that
always means you win the NBA, the big one, right?
Yeah, there's usually a direct line there. So.
It's incredible. No one's ever seen that before. Then you have the Sixers in 7. Sixers, perhaps the free agent out of the offseason. They got Paul George. And then the Pacers at 6, who got to the Eastern Conference Finals. Those two teams right there, I think, Hillbilly, is where I want to start because those are going to be the two most exciting teams out of that bunch, I think. The Pacers, number 1, who were the runner-ups in the in-season tournament. Now, we saw with the Lakers who won the thing that, in-season tournament success might not correlate to playoff success, but it did for the Pacers who got to the Eastern Conference Finals. They made Tyrese Halliburton the star. And then the Sixers, big issue, of course, has been Joel Embiid's health. But if you add Paul George, that is less of a concern. So, Pacers and Sixers are both two teams, I'm going to go ahead and say it right now, I think will be higher than their standings were last year.
Yeah, they might be. The Sixers probably will be. The thing is that this is also where the East gets good. Like all the teams that are above them in the standings from the end of the year last year, those are also going to be better than they were last year. I think every single one of them, except for maybe the Celtics, but I think they're going to be, just
the
as
NBA
good.
Champions.
Right. So I don't know that you can get much better than being the best. But yeah, I think that it's good. That's where the division gets tough. But, the Sixers, they have a big 3 now that's legitimate if it's healthy. I mean, Embiid is still, can be really frustrating, I think, from a fan standpoint. And especially now that he's made his declaration that he will never play a back-to-back again.
Mm-hmm.
Paul George is not exactly the healthiest guy in the world either. It's just if we can see it in the playoffs, it would be really nice to see it one year, but I just wouldn't hold my breath. But we'll see. The Pacers, I think, are going to be exciting, though. I mean, the Pacers averaged 123.3 points per game last year. That was their average.
Yeah,
that's absolutely insane. They're going to be better this year, I think. Tyrese Halliburton was hurt and his hamstring was bad, but he played through it because he wanted to, get the 65 games so that he could be considered for the All NBA team. But he was not himself last year, and they were still that good. They've got a lot of young players that are really exciting. They just got Siakam in the middle of the year last year, so you got to think, a full off season with him, they'll probably be even better. They're a lot of fun to watch. They're a ton of fun to watch. Good team.
I mean, they averaged 3 points more than the Celtics, who were second in points per game, and the Celtics won the title, and the Thunder, who were right there, who were historically good too.
Yeah, and those are insane too. 120 points a game is just insane. But that's, kind of the league that we have now. But, 123 is just, it's like they're playing NBA 2K against each other.
Pacers should probably be exciting again. Let's move up to that next 5. The Magic were 5th. Kind of a surprise, but I remember telling you all on this podcast a couple years ago when Paolo Banchero came out in the draft from Duke, I was like, this guy's going to be, he reminds me a little bit of LeBron. He could be a star, and that's kind of how it turned out to be last year. I think he's still going to grow. And Franz Wagner, too, honestly, for Orlando. And then let's bunch them up here with Cleveland, Hillbilly, because that was that 4-5 matchup in that first round that Cleveland won. And we were talking, I remember in the playoffs last year, it was Donovan Mitchell doesn't want to be here, and he signed an extension. So I don't know if that was true, but they did make a coaching change. So I'm a little interested in that for Cleveland.
Well, they did, and it's probably a good change. We'll see. With Donovan Mitchell, I think a lot of it was, I don't think he's super excited to be in Cleveland. I don't know him, but would imagine if I was young with all the money in the world, I'd probably rather live other places than Cleveland. But I don't think anybody really had any money. The way that the salary cap works, I mean, with the CBA agreement now, there are only a couple teams out there that actually have free agent money. And, like he wanted to go to New York. New York doesn't have any money for him. So I think that's part of why he's stuck there. But I think that, Cleveland, it's going to be interesting. They still have a lot of the same problems that they had last year where they have some redundancies on their roster. I mean, they just have two playmaking guards that need the ball in their hands. And then they have two bigs that cannot shoot the three, in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And that kind of redundancy, I think, can get you in trouble in the playoffs. But they've got a lot of star power on that team. Donovan Mitchell is awesome. I think they're probably going to be right back about where they were, but probably with a few more wins, but, still around 4 or 5 area.
So then Orlando was right there too, and Orlando was kind of
well, Orlando's just really young. I mean, Orlando's problem last year in the playoffs was that their best playmaker, their best guy to get them a bucket when the defense is clamped down, was in his second year. I mean, Banchero's great. He's not the most efficient shooter in the world, but that's exactly what you would expect from somebody that young, who is the primary playmaker on the team. And he did it. There's no reason to think he's not going to be significantly better this year. Franz Wagner his year wasn't that great last year. His shooting was horrible, and they really need him to get better at that. But Jalen Suggs came around as one of the best defensive guards in the league. So they're really excited about him. So yeah, Orlando's also going to be better, which is why it's going to be hard for teams like the Sixers and the Pacers to jump.
Man, and you know what? When Jonathan Isaac puts on those Trump Force ones and he's got that Trump watch made in China on, nobody's stopping that man.
It's a shame too, because like when you watch Jonathan Isaac play, he's a lot of fun to watch. Like he is a phenomenon on defense. Like he really is like unlike anything else. Like you just cannot play basketball around him. He's so good defensively, but you can only play him for about 20 minutes a game where he breaks. And even then he'll still break. And as we know, he's also crazy as a woman.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
The Bucks. I'm just going to let you have it, Hillbilly. I mean, I was looking at the age of these big players on this team. Giannis is 29. He's in his prime. But Chris Middleton's 33. And he's, been injured, been battered by injuries. Damian Lillard's 34. Brook Lopez is 36. And I saw Giannis was talking the other day. He was like, if we don't win a championship, I might get traded. And it's like, oh, really? They're just going to willfully trade you? Or you're going to be like, I kind of want out of here, So
it was weird, wasn't it? I mean, it's just I think Giannis, that's the thing with foreign players. Or really anytime you have a language gap, like sometimes it can be kind of tough to tell, like, is he just a weird person or is there just a language problem? Because it was just like, what in the world is like Milwaukee's like, that's it, Giannis, we've had it with. Like just the best player, maybe the second best player we've ever had as a team. We're just getting rid of you because we can just get another one of you. That's fine. But I kind of wonder if part of it wasn't just him, like, I don't know. Maybe he's even already talked to them a little bit. Like if it falls apart this year, because it just he's getting screwed. Giannis is still one of the very, very, very best players in the league. And there's just that team, they keep making bad decision after bad decision. And they keep doing it like in the way they fill out their roster, the way they use their mid-level exception, which is where you bring in the role players to help the stars. They keep messing it up. Every single year, they're getting players that can't play anymore. And if I was Giannis, I'd really be, I don't know, pretty close to the point of giving up on it. But maybe Damian Lillard comes around this year. He's over his divorce from last year. He's over being traded. Maybe he's a lot better. He's saying all the right things. If Middleton, one of the things that's forgotten is that Chris Middleton looked really good in the playoffs last year, which is kind of surprising, but he did. He wasn't the problem. You put all that together with Giannis. His year last year, he scored over 30 points a game. and he shot 61% from the field. No one has ever done that. Like Wilt never did that. Shaq, nobody has ever done that before. He is just an incredibly efficient scoring machine who's also a former, defensive player of the year, still in his prime. Hopefully they can get it together around him.
Yeah, but they don't have Thanasis anymore.
They don't, which that is one of the most interesting little subplots in the NBA right now. Who signs Thanasis? Yeah, but the thing is that like that actually almost makes him more valuable to the Bucks if he had a torn Achilles, because then they don't have to play him. They can explain to Giannis why they're not playing him. It's because he's hurt.
That is so mean. That is so mean.
Well,
Um, the Knicks, number 2. Knicks kind of made the trade of the offseason, I would say, with
mhm,
Dante.
right.
The Sixers, if you remember, the Sixers coming into the playoffs were kind of on a roll because they had gotten Embiid back from injury at the end of the regular season, and they went on a winning streak, and they kind of so they beat Miami in the play-in, and then that would have been a great 2-7 series, but the Knicks
Yeah.
went through them. They ended up losing to the Pacers, but what that means, these trades, is kind of like you've got great talent up top, and then it kind of takes a dive a little bit on a Tom Thibodeau team. Hillbilly, I will just add
Yeah,
for
but
you.
Tom Thibodeau doesn't really use his bench that much, so maybe that's okay. But yeah, I think most people are probably considering them to be Boston's biggest challenge in the East, and that's probably fair. I think if things broke right for the Bucks, they might actually be a bigger challenge, but there's just so many potential problems with the Bucks that I think you kind of have to give it to the Knicks. But you're right, the depth really falls out. Their starting five is awesome. And Jalen Brunson is just a joy to watch. If people missed him in the playoffs last year, I'm sorry,
Oh
because
my
it was
gosh.
it was so cool to watch him. I worry about players that size playing the physical game that he plays, is if he's going to be able to keep it up. But as for right now, he's still really young. I mean, I think he's probably only like 24 or 25. Actually, no, he's 28. But still, I anticipate he'll still have a healthy season. But going out and getting Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, who they got last year or the year before, I guess, that's a shot across the bow at Boston. I mean, that is directly pointed at Boston. It's kind of like what Minnesota did against Denver last year, where they kind of specified their roster against one team. They have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby are maybe the two best wing defenders in the league. I mean, they are so good at that. And Boston, of course, is led by their two wings in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So they're really kind of equipped to do this against Boston. But, we'll just see. There's just something about Karl Anthony Towns that always makes me wonder. We'll see. It's good that New York has something to be excited about. It's great for the league that New York has a good team again. They should be right there with them. And depending on injuries, which, as we know, every year, that's one of the biggest factors in the playoffs, they could be right there.
Oh yeah, the league loves having potentially Philly, but New York and Boston up there as two of the best teams in the East and potentially the league. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So the Celtics, Hillbilly, they were the champions of the NBA last season, as you said. I don't think you can get much better than that. They won. They ran through the East. They won 64 games. That was
Right.
14 more than the Knicks did, who were in second. And Jason Tatum signed a max contract extension this offseason.
Yeah. He took the title of highest paid player in NBA history away from his teammate.
So they, not much movement there for the Celtics, but they, when you win the championship, you really don't want to lose anything, but you don't want to mess with what works on either.
No, you don't. And they're set up. They're in great shape. I mean, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown play every game. They're incredible. Jaylen Brown, I think, is still in the ascendancy. I think he's still getting better as a player. they've just, those two guys can go so far. And then when you fill everything out around them, everybody that they play can play very good defense for their position. Everybody that they play has very good positional size. They're usually an inch or two taller than whoever they're against. And everyone that they play can hit the three, which is just, that's where it gets really scary for other teams because you just can't cheat off of anybody or you pay for it. Yeah, their issue though is Porzingis is going into the season hurt. And he's not just hurt, it's a foot and ankle problem, which for, a guy that's 7'3", that is always alarming. And I don't think they're expecting him back. Probably, I think realistically, probably January or maybe even February. So how they deal with that in the meantime, because they're not, I, I don't think they're the deepest team in the world. I don't think Luke Cornett, their backup center, along with Al Horford, who is now, I think he's 39.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's somewhat problematic, but they've got so much other talent on the team to make up for it. As long as Porzingis comes back healthy in time for the playoffs and he's, in there for the playoffs, I think they're going to be very, very strong contenders.
Big Al's only 38, so put some respect on him. But as long as he's there, I'm still gonna be like, it's still crazy to think that Jaylen Brown is 27, Jason Tatum is 26. Because they've been doing this for years now. I mean, I remember watching them in the Eastern Conference Finals against LeBron and the Cavs.
Yeah.
Like they've been doing this, and the only thing that's gonna stop the Celtics right now or in the next few years is the salary cap, because eventually it's gonna catch up with all these.
It is, but they are so well run. I mean, Danny Ainge did a phenomenal job. I mean, getting those two players. I mean, both of those guys came from that horrible trade with the Nets, where they just one of the most lopsided trades in sports history. They trade a completely broken Kevin Garnett, who basically can't play anymore, and Paul Pierce over there for just basically for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown is what it turned into. So they win a championship with those two old guys and they trade them in and they get these two incredible players that just sets them up for more than a decade. And then Brad Stevens has come in to replace Danny Ainge and he's doing just as well. I mean, picking up great role players like Drew Holiday and Derek White and Porzingis, and just they don't make mistakes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them in the future. But this year they're definitely set up.
And it's hitting on those drafts too, because they didn't have the first pick in those drafts. That 2016 draft, Brown was third.
Right.
First pick was Ben Simmons.
Yep.
I think they got. I think they won that, and then that first pick in the next year's draft was Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, who is now a unsigned free agent. So yeah, they definitely got the better of those picks. I mean, it was an amazing move by Ainge. Always surprised that Boston fans aren't more just over the moon with Danny Ainge, but I don't know.
Because he left. I don't know.
Even while he was there, he would miss on draft picks like everybody else. And Boston fans are so spoiled that they would give him crap for it.
They never win anything. The Patriots never win. The Bruins, the Celtics,
the Red Sox never win. Yeah,
never. That's the Eastern Conference. Before we get to the West, Hillbilly, let's do our little standings prediction at the end of the season. I guess I'll start us out here. So in 8, I'll just go 8-1. I'll go with Miami because I don't know what to think of Miami. Miami could be really good if Jimmy Butler plays a lot and Tyler Hero plays a lot, because both of them missed a ton of games last year, or they could not be. They could miss the playoffs, honestly. I've got the Magic at 7 just because of how tough the East is. I've got the Bucks at 6 because Giannis is incredible, but I'm wary on everyone else around him.
Yeah, the Bucks at 6. Okay.
Yes, Hillbilly, I do.
Okay.
You have them number 1, so don't even start. I have the Cavs at 5. I got Sixers at 4, Pacers at 3, and then just like last year, Knicks and Celtics 2 and 1.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I think you're a little low on the Bucks. I mean,
Ah,
I think they're going to be better than they were last year. I mean, I think there's every reason to think that they'll be better. I mean, last year was a really tough year for them. You know, having a coaching change right in the middle of the season. Um,
Doc.
yeah, so I think they'll it's tough to see them going down that far. I would probably start with the Heat at 8 as well, and then I would probably go with the Magic. So that would be the Magic at 7, and then have the Pacers at 6, the Cavaliers at 5. Then the Sixers, I'm sorry, the Bucks I would have at 4, the Sixers at 3, the Knicks at 2, and Boston at 1.
Very nice. So we both got the Sixers and Knicks and Celtics up there. Very, very interesting. All right. Eastern Conference is done. Let's go to the West, Hillbilly. I think these bottom teams of the West that we're going to start with, we might have a little more to say about these teams just because of how loaded the West is.
Yeah.
Last year, the Trailblazers were 15th. They missed the playoffs, but they've got some exciting players to watch, like Scoot Henderson. And then the team right above them has the Rookie of the Year, Victor Wembanyama. We
Yeah.
came into the season last year, we're like, Victor Wembanyama is going to be so good. Oh my gosh. And he lived up to the hype. And then I think then some. Like it was incredible to watch, honestly. Grizzlies at 13, and that's a team who was second in the West the year before, and they
Yeah.
dropped to 13. Obviously, John Morant, all that, and Marcus Smart, who they traded for, was not healthy either. The Jazz at 12, and then the Rockets at 11. The Rockets, who, if the season was, we don't want it to be longer than 82 games, they're trying to shorten it,
No.
but if it was longer than 82 games, the Rockets could have made a play for the play in there. They were hot at the
Mhm.
end of the season. So I don't know where you want to start with those 5 teams because, there's with all of them, there's almost something exciting to talk about.
I mean, I think you're going to have 2 teams that are intentionally tanking, and that's going to be the Jazz and the Trailblazers. So
Mhm.
they're almost definitely going to be the 2 teams that are right at the very bottom. I think the Spurs management would like to tank this year, but I'm not sure that Wembanyama is going to let them. I mean, for those who didn't see him last year or get a chance to watch him, I mean, it was the most incredible rookie season I've ever seen. It just he was an absolute phenomenon. I mean, led the league by I think it was almost a full block
It was
in blocks.
1.2 blocks. He averaged 3.6 per game.
Right, which is preposterous. You know, I mean that's just insane. And he just looks so fluid. You know, it's not unthinkable that he is going to be a player that eventually has a level of skill like a Kevin Durant, but at a size like Manute Bol. You know? Just really, really so fun to watch him play. He seems like he's got the mindset to be one of the best ever. And what that means for this year coming up, we'll see. But barring injury, you know, hopefully that won't happen. It would be tragic. But you know, barring injury, he's going to be a lot better this year than he was last year. And last year, he was the runner up to Defensive Player of the Year. And as he said, you know, hey, Rudy did a good job, deserved it, but that's your last one. You know,
Uh-oh.
like he's planning on, and I think he probably will go on a run of them. Yeah, a great player, and by himself, he's a good reason to tune into Spurs games. So
And they have your favorite player, Hillbilly, Chris Paul.
yeah, they do.
Nope.
It'll be interesting to see. Point guards at his age don't typically do very well. We'll see. Yeah, hopefully he's only there for a little bit, so I don't have to watch him too much.
So that team right above them, the Grizzlies, I'm kind of thinking they're not going to go 27 and 55, especially if John Morant is healthy. I remember John Morant, he had that suspension, then he got injured. I remember he came back from that suspension and he had that game on TNT and he went off in that game
Yeah,
to
he did.
start. I mean, you can when he plays, he's incredible.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's one of the most athletic players I've ever seen. I mean, he's just nobody can stay in front of him. But you know, I worry about his health. I mean, it wasn't just his behavior last year; it was also his health. He's tiny. I mean, he probably weighs less than 200 pounds still, and he just throws himself into the lane. and just takes all of that punishment. Because, the issue that he has, and I think the issue that the Grizzlies still have as a team, is shooting. John Morant can't shoot. Like he's a really bad 3-point shooter. Well, for his position, he's really bad. And Desmond Bain can shoot really well, but Marcus Smart, who's probably going to be a starter for this team if he's healthy, he's not a particularly good shooter either. Neither is Jaren Jackson anymore. And Zach Edey, their big rookie, who I think everyone will remember from March Madness, he definitely can't shoot.
No, Zach Edey is going to be standing under the basket the whole game.
He's done really well in the preseason. I mean, it's funny because I think the word on Zach Edey, more towards like the beginning of the college year, was that he just wasn't going to do anything in the NBA. So enjoy him now. But people are really, really high on him. So we'll see how he does. But yeah, I mean, with all that said, when John Morant is healthy and he has Desmond Bain, who has grown into an awesome player next to him, they are at least a 50-win team. They always have been every year that's been the case. So I think they'll get back up there, and they're not going to stay down in the bottom.
Yeah, John Moran is 174 pounds, and he's
well.
6'2".
That's I don't know that I would imagine he's picked up some weight.
Probably, but like you look at a player like Anthony Edwards, who's only 2 inches taller and he's 50 pounds heavier.
Yeah, and it's not like John Morant. I mean, someone like Tyrese Maxey on the Sixers looks like he's almost as small, but he stays outside a lot. He doesn't do what John Morant does, which is to just throw himself at Rudy Gobert 30 times a game, where eventually you're going to get hurt doing that. But he is fun to watch, though. I mean, he is an amazing athlete.
It's true. Then this Rockets team, Hillbilly, like I said, they went on a run at the end of the season. Thanks to Jalen Green, their young star, and then they got the 3rd pick in the draft, who everybody's been high on, Reed Shepherd, who comes in from Kentucky. It's just they're in the West, so it's going to be really tough to move up. But if they can sustain what they had going at the end of the season last year, then they could knock one of these teams out for the play-in. Honestly, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk later about which team that's going to be. But I think they will. I mean, I don't think the Rockets are ready to take like the kind of step that Oklahoma City took last year. They've got a huge collection of talent. They probably have about 12 really good young players, but they don't necessarily have the rock solid number one option yet. Jalen Green came on well at the end of the year, but I think you need to see it because I think he's in like his maybe 5th year. We need to see it for longer than that. And he is still a major defensive liability. Their best player last year was probably Şengün, their center, who looks really, really good, but they were trying to shop Şengün. And they're not sure. I think he's eligible for an extension and they haven't signed him to one. That's kind of a sign of where they still are as a team. When your best player, you might actually be shopping and you don't know if you want to commit to. So while they do have like all the reason in the world to be super excited about their future, they still have a ton of good draft picks left. I don't know that they've had their defined like 1A player yet that's going to give them that huge bounce, but I do think they'll make it into the playoffs. Well, the play-in at least.
The play-in. All right, so let's take a look at these teams that were in the play-in last year. The Warriors were 10th. They lost in the play-in. So did the Kings. They were 9th. Kings kind of dropped off after that exciting season, but I mean, they didn't really drop off. It was just the West is the West, and then the Lakers and the Pelicans. So let's start with the Warriors, Hillbilly. The Splash Brothers era is over. It's gone because Klay Thompson is in Dallas, but they still have Steph. And if you watch the Olympics, I didn't even talk to you about the Olympics, but if you just saw the Olympics, Steph Curry can still do things.
It really was one of the most awesome. And I am definitely not the person that's all rah Team USA. Like I always root for the underdog. So I tend to kind of root for the other teams, which is, I know, not super patriotic, but
it's terrible.
Nobody could watch that game and not just be incredibly excited with what they just saw Steph Curry do. I mean,
oh my gosh,
it was just, My wife, who does not like basketball at all, thought it was just awesome. You know, so
I mean, it's just incredible, and we've watched it for 10 plus years now in the NBA, and it's still just, he can still do that. He's the best shooter who's ever lived, you know?
yeah, I
Um,
mean, no doubt, no doubt.
so Steph Curry's there. So you're going to get more minutes from your young players like Kuminga and Pajemski, and Draymond Green is there too. I know how you love Draymond Hillbilly, but it just feels like to me the Warriors are in this spot where it's like you've got this great player in Steph Curry, but even the time to get into the playoffs is kind of fading rapidly, in my opinion, unless these young players can like really step up right now.
Yeah, and some of them might. I mean, Kaminga had a good I don't know if I'd quite call it a breakthrough or breakout season, but it's pretty close to it. I mean, he improved a lot last year, and he looks like he's going to be a really good player. Like he could be like maybe a number 2 or a number 3 player on a championship team. Maybe not this year coming up, but like he can get there. And they are super high on Pajemski, the rookie from last year.
Mhm.
You know, they drafted him pretty late in the first round, but they love him, and he did have a really good year. And the word that they put out is that he is untouchable in drafts. They will not, or trades. They will not trade him. So they're obviously super high on him. They've got a good team. I think in the East they would almost certainly be a playoff team, but in the West it's going to be tough.
Yeah. And then well, actually, let's skip the Kings for now. I want to talk about the Lakers. I want to, my favorite player, Hillbilly, Bronny James, LeBron James Jr. I'm just so excited that he is playing with his father, LeBron.
Yes,
He's
so
doing
sweet.
so well in the preseason. Um, don't think I think he's jacking up threes, and I don't think he's made one yet as of this taping on Friday the 18th. But, they've Dalton Connect is the rookie that they should actually be looking at because he's been doing really well and he's coming out of Tennessee. But LeBron and AD were like great last year when they were healthy, and AD was healthy a lot of that season, if I recall.
I
And
think
they
he
were,
played like 72 games if I'm
yeah,
or in the 70s. He they both
playing.
had very healthy seasons,
Yeah.
which is kind of scary for the Lakers. Yeah, they were exactly. They were still 8th, or were they 8th, or I think they were 7th.
They may have been. It's the play-in weirdness thing.
Regardless, they can't reasonably expect because they didn't bring in better players. I mean, Dalton Connect is having a good preseason, but he's a rookie. We'll see how much of that translates into the season. They can't count on that kind of health from Anthony Davis and LeBron James again. And even if they do get it, they're still going to be like 7th or 8th. So that's the Lakers. And I love seeing it because I'm not a Lakers fan, obviously, but
Well, Hillbilly, I just wanted to let you know that your dreams of becoming an NBA head coach are real because they're taking podcasters now. I don't know if you knew this.
yeah. If you can get, I mean, JJ Redick, to be fair, does have other things on his resume that I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there could be other issues, and I mean, he had LeBron on his podcast, so they're all super friends, and
I just don't like the way that they were like, yeah, we're gonna do this head coaching search with all these different people. And it's like, just you're gonna hire JJ Redick because LeBron wants him. I mean, like, come on. You're gonna
oh,
draft LeBron
I think
James
they
from
may have
Connecticut.
hired Hurley from Connecticut if he hadn't turned him down,
That
but
is true.
yeah, I don't know. I for some reason I don't think there's going to be a super high sense of urgency from that team this year, and I think it's enough for the Lakers. I mean, ESPN will be covering them nonstop, just no matter how bad they are. So there will be plenty of coverage and takes from Perk and the rest of them
Yeah, well, they got
on
rid of
that.
Zach Lowe, so they don't need serious analysis anymore, Hillbilly. They just need Big Perk giving out them takes, let me tell you.
Yeah,
Carry the
and
hell on.
the first pass between Bronny and LeBron during a regular season game, they'll have wall to wall coverage of, I'm sure.
Breaking news. Oh
It
my
is pretty
gosh.
cool. And I don't like the Lakers. I don't like LeBron, but I got to admit that is pretty cool.
Yes, but he shouldn't be in the NBA. Let's be real.
Probably not.
The Kings. The Kings were if you remember 2 years ago, and the Kings made that jump to third in the West. They had that first round series with the Warriors, where the Sacramento just went absolutely insane. They lit the beam so many times, and they still won 46 games last year. It's not like they were a bad team. I mean, 46 and 36 would have put
Mhm.
you, you know, in it would have been eighth in the East, but it would have, not you probably would have made it into the playoffs instead of just losing in the play-in. But so they drop Harrison Barnes, they add DeMar DeRozan. So I'm kind of interested to get your thoughts here on the Kings, so Billy, because it's not like they were a bad team last year, and they've got De'Aaron
Mm.
Fox and Domantas Sabonis. When I think of the Kings, I think of them as a team that can still contend with teams that we're going to talk about later in the West.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're getting into the realm of teams that are like, if things broke really well, could be contenders. I mean, De'Aaron Fox is fantastic last year. He had a great year. And, he is only 26 years old, so he's still getting better. And I wonder how many people really got to see him play last year. But just, phenomenal player, had a great year. And they've got a lot of really good players around him. I mean, DeRozan's the best by the numbers. He's the best clutch player in the NBA. Sabonis is really solid at the things that he does. They're a very offensive heavy team, and they've just leaned into it more by getting DeRozan, who's not really known for his defense. That's the thing with them. They're pretty much just going to have to outscore everybody. And that usually runs dry at some point in the playoffs, but they're a danger to any team they play because they can score so much.
Yeah, if I remember, I guess 2 years ago, I think they were like the Pacers, and they were leading the league in
Yeah.
points per game because of what they could do in the regular season. 7 last year was the Pelicans. The Pelicans were 7th at the end of the regular season, and they lost to the Lakers in the play-in, which
Yeah.
is why that whole thing is all jacked up. And they
Yeah.
lost to the Thunder in the first round. As Charles Barkley said, they quit against the Thunder. That was absolutely true. But Zion played 70 games last season, and if I remember, the reason why they quit is because he got injured.
We got injured against the Lakers, and they were beating the Lakers in that play-in game. Zion was, at least for that night, he was by far the best player on the court. He was just scoring at will, and then he pulled up. I think it was a hamstring, something in his leg, and then it was over. They didn't really have an answer for the Lakers after that. But if he hadn't gotten injured, I have no doubt they would have beaten the Lakers, and then been in a different position for the playoffs. But the Pelicans are interesting because they had Valanciunas at center, who's just this big, massive Eastern European dude, and they let him go, and now they don't really have a center. It looks like the plan might be that they're going to play Zion at center a lot, which is interesting. I mean, Zion obviously has the bulk to do it, but I think he's only like 6'5", 6'6". They just don't have anybody to play at center. And then the other festering problem that they have is with Brandon Ingram, who is eligible for an extension, really wants one. They're not giving him one because he doesn't really fit with the team that well anymore. So he asked for a trade, and they can't find anybody to take him. So that's a real sore of a problem going into the season. They've got a ton of talent. I mean, like it or not, Trey Murphy is a really good player. I mean, he may be a UVA guy, but he's what everybody is looking for in the NBA. They've got a lot of good players. They made a big move by getting DeJounte Murray from Atlanta. It's just that center position's bad. Brandon Ingram being unhappy. Supposedly Zion is in the best shape of his life, but I think we hear that this time of the year every single year. So yeah, they're a really interesting team. I mean, they could, if things rounded out right, they could be fantastic, but they've got some definite concerns.
Yeah, I kind of put my 2K my GM head on when I'm thinking about Brandon Ingram, because this is his last year of his contract he's going into right now. And so if you're the Pelicans, if you're not going to sign him to an extension, you need to trade him, because if he goes in
Yep.
free agency, you don't get anything back.
And we're going to
It's
talk about how bad that can be for a team in a few teams here. But yeah, but they can't. Nobody will take him. Not at his salary. And the thing is that you trade for him with the idea that you're going to pay him.
mm-hmm.
That you're going to give him that next big cut because he wants a
Yeah.
max contract. And I just don't know that there are any takers. And Brandon Ingram would do himself a big favor if he would just kind of, roll with it this year, shoot a lot more from behind the 3-point line, because that's one of the biggest problems that the Pelicans have with him is that he's a decent enough 3-point shooter. He just won't take enough of them. And he's got to recommit to defense and be more like the Brandon Ingram that was with the Lakers. But those are all big, huge question marks hanging over the team.
That's true. So let's move into the teams automatically in the playoffs last year. First off, the Suns. Oh, the Suns. They're always like, we've got Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, so we're gonna be so good. And then we finish sixth because they never play together. And now they have a new coach, Billy, someone you're very familiar with, an NBA champion head coach. I will just remind you of Mike Budenholzer. Is that what they needed? And Tyus Jones at point guard.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Suns are actually going to be better. And I think this happens a lot of times when you put together a really top heavy team, is that your first year or two, you're not as good as you could be because you just don't have the people surrounding them. And just sometimes just getting one or two more good players can make all the difference in the world. Tyus Jones was a great get for them. He's one of the most efficient point guards in the league. His assist to turnover is always like in the top 5 every year. He's perfect for that team because they really needed somebody to set the table for him. They also got Mason Plumlee, which, whatever you think about Mason Plumlee, like, he's a decent backup center that can keep the offense flowing. Grayson Allen had a really good year for them, as despicable as he can be sometimes. And apparently he is really bulked up. I haven't seen it, but I read that his photos, he's looking like the Incredible Hulk now. So I don't, that could be interesting to see. I'd be curious. But you put all those guys together and they're obviously a super offensive heavy team. And last year they had a defensive coach, a guy that had won a championship with the Lakers, but a definite defensive minded coach in Vogel. This year they bring in a more offensive minded coach. And, as a very big fan of the Giannis Bucks, I watched a lot of Budenholzer, and I definitely had some problems with the way he ran the team in the playoffs. But his system that he puts in, it is a regular season win machine. He gets the players to take all the low hanging fruit that is there in the regular season before teams really clamp down in the playoffs. I think that the Suns will, health assumed, will be much better this year. That's a big assumption, though.
Yeah, I mean, these teams in front of them, it's kind of. Let's talk about the Mavericks. So, Billy, they were in the finals last year because that Luka Kyrie combo finally clicked,
Yep.
and they only lost 4 of their last 20 games in the regular season. And I remember saying that stat out last year, and you gave me that caveat that their last 2 games they just didn't play their best players because they were already blocked into where they wanted to be.
Yeah.
So it's, competitively, they won 16 of their last 18 games,
Yep.
and they added Klay Thompson, who we all know from Golden State, who's pretty older, but still, if you're looking for a clutch player, that might help you out. So, the Mavericks were kind of not a surprise maybe to get to the finals because they were the 5th seed, but they came into the regular season, or they came into the playoffs off a hot
Yeah.
regular season, Hillbilly.
Yeah, they did. And it's because they got significantly better at the trade deadline. They made some just fantastic moves. And, bringing in Daniel Gafford to solidify the center spot. Derek Lively was a revelation as a rookie. I mean, he was I think he was like the 11th or 12th pick. So we knew that he was going to be pretty good, but he just came right in and is a fantastic lob threat, for Luka, which giving Luka a lob threat is just really dangerous. Now they add Klay Thompson to the mix. It's interesting. He's probably not going to be able to play much defense, but he's still one of the best spot up shooters in the league. Giving Luka that target too, all making for a huge Luka season. I think they're probably. I have really high hopes for Dallas this year.
Let's hope. The Clippers were fourth. Clippers, this is a brand new era, Hillbilly. They've got a new logo. They've got their own brand new arena. I saw Steve Ballmer on 60 Minutes talking about how many toilets it has, but it feels like they've got the same old troubles because I was watching ESPN the other day and NBA Today comes on and they got Shams on there. It's going breaking news. Kawhi Leonard is not going to start the season because he's injured and we don't know when he's going to come back.
Yeah,
so,
out indefinitely.
So.
Yeah, so they're off season. They lose Paul George. They get nothing in return for him. Absolutely nothing. And now Kawhi Leonard, I think it was yesterday, you had Big Dumb Big Perk on ESPN saying he should retire.
I did see him say that.
And he's not alone though. It's I think there's a legitimate question if he's ever going to play again. Or if he's ever going to be able to string together more than a couple games. He came back for the playoffs last year, but then immediately it was like, can't do it.
Yeah.
And then this summer comes along and he's supposed to play for the Olympic team. And the Olympic team takes one look at him and they're like, go home. Like, we cannot use you.
Yeah.
Which was really embarrassing. And because I love Kawhi Leonard, he is one of my favorite players. And it just sucks to see it happening to him. But it looks like that knee is just gone, which is a absolute calamity for Los Angeles. What's happened here? Losing Paul George for nothing and now maybe not having Kawhi Leonard much at all this season means that they have to basically give the keys to the car to James Harden. And they don't have any other real playmakers on that team. It's going to be Harden all the time. And Harden's just going to be looking to get another contract and padding his stats. I think the Clippers are going to be horrible this year. And the ultimate tragedy of it is that they don't own their draft picks. So they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the West. And who does have their draft picks for the next 3 or 4 years is Oklahoma City, which is just absolutely insane.
Oh, no.
We're going to talk about Oklahoma City in a little bit and just how good they are going to be this year. But they've got the Clippers draft pick. Like, Oklahoma City has an, statistically significant chance of getting Cooper Flag next year. Like, that could easily happen, which is mind-boggling when you think about that.
I can't report yet on Cooper Flag. I haven't seen him play. College season hasn't started yet, but from everything I'm hearing, he's like solidified number one. He's playing for Duke. This man is going to be incredible.
Well, and I think from everything we're hearing, like the top 5 in the draft they're all going to be incredible. And there's a really good chance that Oklahoma City will get one of them, which is just, again, like it's just remarkable. And the bad luck for the Clippers. I feel bad for Steve Ballmer and his, $120 billion.
Oh, the poor baby. the poor baby. That would be really funny if the Clippers just stink this year and the Thunder have their draft picks and the Clippers are led by 35.
I think they're going to stink. I think it's a lock. Like, I really don't see Kawhi playing, and they really just don't have anybody else on the team that can give them anything. And Harden, like, we've seen what happened in Philly and New Jersey when Harden is kind of left on his own, what it looks like now. It's awful. Like, it's horrible. It's not like the way it was in Houston where he could do that. Yeah. I feel the poor Clippers. They just cannot get it together.
It's terrible. They're not starting off this new era. On the right track.
It's just, and what puts it all into perspective is Paul George leaves, they get nothing for him, and this is right when they start paying for Paul George, all those draft picks. So Oklahoma City, not only do they get those draft picks, but they also got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander out of that trade.
Oh, just a MVP.
Yeah, better than Paul George ever was. already. It's just it's a remarkable set of circumstances. But
So the Timberwolves were third last year. They were the team that lost to the Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals. They kind of broke down there at the end, but they had that front court that for the last couple of years, I think both of us on this podcast, when that trade was made for Rudy Gobert, were kind of like, what are the Timberwolves doing with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns? Worked out though.
yeah,
But then, this offseason, they trade Towns to New York. So that means Rudy Gobert is down there now. But they add Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo. Anthony Edwards is, I would say, a superstar. And they had the best defense last year by over 2 points, honestly. I was looking at the stats from last year, and I was
yeah,
like, the defensive rankings weren't even close, honestly. The Timberwolves were kind of
yeah. And
running
and
away with
and
that.
and they were playing in the West too. Like to do that in the West is really impressive. But yeah, they're the Wolves are going to be really good again. I think it's going to be. I think they're actually probably not going to be quite as good as they were last year, depending on what Edwards does with his development. They're still really really old at point guard. The way that they beat Denver last year, because you remember in the playoffs, it went to 7 games. I think Denver was up by like 20 late
Yeah,
in the
in that
third
game
quarter
7.
or early fourth. And then
Mhm.
they just kind of fell apart. I think they were just broken. Jamal Murray was not himself all playoffs. I think Jokic was completely exhausted, and they could just sandwich Karl Anthony Towns and Gobert on Jokic, and it that's really hard. That kind of size. Now they're not going to have Karl Anthony Towns anymore. Julius Randle, I don't think is as good a player. I think they had to do it, for salary cap reasons, which is kind of a shame to see a small market team get squeezed out like that. But they're still going to be really good. I mean, Anthony Edwards, I'm not a huge fan personally, but he's a really good player. He's going to get better. I think it's a little bit early, to be anointing him the next face of the league. We need to see it. He did not look good at the end of the playoffs. He looked
That
horrible against the Mavs.
that's Bronny. Bronny's the next face of the league.
Yeah,
What are
yeah,
you on
maybe,
about?
maybe, maybe that's true. But we'll see. I mean, like if Edwards just like if he was as winds up being as good as Donovan Mitchell, I think that's within the range of possibility too, which would mean he's a really good player. But I do think they'll be maybe a step below where they were last year, but still a really strong team. In the regular season, Gobert is a top 5 defense all by himself.
So that team that they lost to that you mentioned, the Nuggets, who have your second favorite player, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah,
Jokic.
I think that's
The
true.
just the MVP of the league again. By the way, we picked MVPs at the beginning of last season. I did say that Jokic was gonna win.
Yeah,
Not really a tough call, but I
yeah.
just letting y'all know.
Yeah, but I mean that's a big call though because that was 3 in a row for him.
That's
They're
true.
like he joined a very very small group of players that have ever done that.
So, I look at the Nuggets, they won the title 2 years ago over Miami, and they added Russell Westbrook this offseason, but if you remember from the past offseason, they lost a couple of key bench players. And
Yeah.
so this offseason, then they lose Reggie Jackson and Contavious Caldwell-Pope. So it's still like you've got your core, you got your best players, you've got Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., but it just feels like off the bench, unless Christian Brown can really make a big step and a couple other players, it feels like in that aspect, they're not getting better
Yeah,
when
well, I
other
mean,
teams in the West might be.
yeah, Christian Brown's he's not off the bench. He's got to start for him now. Which is I guess not ideal. I mean, I think Denver took a lot of flack over the offseason for letting Contavious Caldwell Pope go. And then, of course, they lost Bruce Brown and Jeff Green the year before that. They couldn't have kept Bruce Brown, but they let KCP go. But when you look at it, like I don't know that it was a wrong move. I mean, Caldwell Pope is I think he's like 34 now, and he had a horrible playoff. Like he couldn't shoot. He wasn't playing good defense. I don't know that Christian Brown is really that much worse. They have to be careful saving the money. I think the biggest thing for the Nuggets really is Jamal Murray. If Jamal Murray can get healthy again and get back to where he was when they won the championship, which was, very recent.
Yeah.
That's all Jokic needs. I'm convinced of it. All he needs is just one other person that can occasionally break down a defense, and that can be enough. That's how good Jokic is. I think Jokic is still the best player in the NBA, even better than Giannis, which, makes me sad to say, but
Oh.
he is the most skilled basketball player I think I've ever seen. And he's a center. It's just remarkable. Someone with that size, that skilled.
Hmm. And when you look at him, you're like, "There's no way," but he
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, he did. He took everyone in the league by surprise. I mean, nobody expected it. I can't remember if it was Connolly as the GM or Masai Ujiri who drafted him, but they ESPN didn't expect it either because they ran a Taco Bell commercial while he was being drafted. So nobody knew it, and you take one look at him, and that's what you think. And you also wouldn't think that somebody that big and he looks kind of soft, but he plays every game. He doesn't get hurt. I'd knock on wood because that would suck. But yeah, he's seems like a great teammate. Just a great player.
The Joker. So then this number one team, Hillbilly in the West, the Thunder, who were actually tied with the Nuggets for that record, 57-25 at the end of last season. But they won the tiebreaker. They were the youngest number one seed in the history of the National Basketball Association. And they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was in a finalist for the most valuable player in the league award. And
Yep,
the crazy
second.
thing is, they weren't this offseason. They were just like, yeah, we were the number one seed. Let's just sit pat. No, they added Alex Caruso. They added Isaiah Hartenstein. So they made moves still in the West. So it's almost like they got better and they're not even, looking at their draft picks that they might have in the future from some teams who might not be too good. So those might be good draft picks. We're not even talking about that. We're talking about the players that they have now.
Yeah, they're set. I mean, they were the number one seed last year. We talked a lot about Oklahoma City going into the preseason last year because it was really high on them. And I mean, I have to say I wasn't alone. You could see the signs. Shai Gilgeous was developing into like a true number one that can win you a championship. Jalen Williams had a great rookie season. What we didn't know was how good Chet Holmgren was going to be, which he is immediately one of the best defenders in the league, and can hit the three, stretch the defense. Great player himself. Yeah, they were the youngest number one seed, as you said. They were, I think, the second youngest team in the league, in the entire league. I think it was only Detroit or San Antonio that was actually younger, and they sucked, And then they're second, and they are the best team in the West, at least, statistically in the regular season. And they were, they have all these indicators of successful playoff teams. Like they were top 5 in both offense and defense rating, which that's the kind of thing like the Celtics did. That's how you get to be that good of a team. There's every reason in the world to think that Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are going to be even better this year. Shai, I think he's still 26. 25 or 26. So he's still actually getting better. I think he's the odds on favorite in Vegas to win MVP this year. And then, if they had any real weaknesses last year, it was that Chet, he is one of the skinniest dudes on earth. I mean, he is just rail thin. And
Yeah.
it happened in the playoffs where like Derek Lively was just throwing him around in the playoffs because he's a thin dude. So they go and they address that problem. They get Isaiah Hartenstein from the Knicks, who, the Knicks were in the same position that Denver was in last year with Bruce Brown. They could only pay him but so much because of the cap rules. And so Oklahoma City just swoops in and grabs him. Hartenstein was one of the best interior defenders in the entire league. I think he was like second in shot percentage at the rim when he was guarding.
Yeah, the Knicks loved him last year.
Yeah, he was a huge reason why the Knicks had that surge was when he took over for Mitchell Robinson. And so then just like They just happened to be there at just the right moment. They were one of the very few teams with cap space. So they just get this guy who fills in the perfect hole. Hartenstein is huge. He's a strong dude. He's just perfect for what they needed to kind of help that deficiency that they have. And then, they had Josh Giddey last year, who they were benching in the playoffs because he does present some. He's not a good teammate for Shea Gilgeous. Like their styles do not work together that well. Um, and so they are able to trade Giddey, who they had benched anyways, for Alex Caruso, who has turned himself into a guy that every NBA GM wants on their team. He's like the ultimate 3-and-D player, great 3-point shooter, one of the very best perimeter defenders in the league. So now they have built this team where you have got phenomenal defenders at every single position. And everybody but Hartenstein can shoot the three very well. And you've got backups like Lou Dort is now going to be a backup. And, you can ask, what's his name? Luka Doncic, how much fun it is to play against Lou Dort. Like it's horrible. He's that good of a defender. He's going to be coming off the bench. It's really, really exciting time to be a Thunder fan, for sure.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Thunder fans on this, not on this podcast. So that's the West. Hillbilly, your top 8 teams who you think is going to be what the playoff standings are going to be when we hit April in the Western Conference.
Right. So number 8, I would have the Pelicans. It's kind of close as far as I'm concerned between the Pelicans and the Lakers there. But I think that you can't assume health with the Lakers. And if Anthony Davis or LeBron James go down, then I think the Pelicans are going to be the better team. Mm-hmm. And then at 7, I have the Kings. I think they're going to be really good. It's a tough division or tough conference. Then the Grizzlies at 6. The Suns at 5, which I know that's not much of a step up from 6 from last year, but I do think they will be a better team. And then I've got the Wolves at 4, the Nuggets at 3, the Mavs at 2. I don't think you can discount what the Mavs did late season last year. I think they just actually are that good of a team. Mm-hmm. And then OKC at 1, which that's the consensus pick too. That's what basically everybody, including Vegas, is picking is OKC at 1.
So it's not going to happen.
Yeah, maybe not, but that's another reason that I think people are picking them is they're so resilient too. They've got like 13 really good players on that team. They're so loaded that they can withstand injuries. Like if Denver loses a player, they are up the creek. They don't have anybody to fill in. With OKC, it's not that big a deal unless it's Shea.
Yeah. So in the West, for me, this was tough because I made my lists and I'm like, who did I leave out? Oh, I left out this team. I didn't want to leave out this team. So then I put the back. I'm like, well, I got to drop this team, but I don't want to leave out this team. So, it's like,
it's good.
So 8, I have the Pelicans as well. That is dependent on Zion playing a lot, obviously. The Grizzlies at 7, Kings at 6, Nuggets at 5, and I was like, the Nuggets at 5, but yeah, I think that might be where they end up. The Suns at 4, Mavericks at 3, like you said. I mean, the teams that, ran into the season. That's why I was like at the end, I was, at 8, I was like, well, I left out the Lakers, I left out the Warriors, but I also left out the Rockets, and I was like, I kind of want to put the Rockets in there, but it was just so hard. Those teams that makes a run at the end of the last season. So the Mavericks at 3, and you know what? I'm going to have the Thunder at 2 because I don't want to hear, I want to hear when the Thunder aren't number 1. Who did pick them number 1? It was Zander. So I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm going to have the Timberwolves at number 1.
Okay.
There you go. Well, you just heard the facts, so I hope you absorbed all that information. But before we end this podcast, Hillbilly, we got to make our prediction for the ultimate one as well, the NBA Finals. I guess since you just went first for the Western Conference, I guess I'll go with my finals prediction here first. So out of the East, I was really like, I don't know how it can't be the Celtics again, but I'm thinking I don't want a repeat champion. So I didn't go with the Celtics.
Hmm.
I went with the pick that I'm probably going to regret. So I picked the Sixers because I'm thinking that Paul George and Joel Embiid down the stretch, because in the playoffs, you don't play back to back. So, Billy, so Joel Embiid hopefully will play all those games.
Yeah,
So
we'll
I'm going to go
see.
with the Sixers out of the East. And in the West, there's a bunch of teams. The Mavericks, I think, obviously could go. I felt like I would be burned by the Suns if I picked the Suns because they always do something to me. The Nuggets, I think, could get there. The Thunder, I couldn't do the Thunder. So I'm going to go with the Timberwolves. And then my champion is going to be the 76ers.
Wow.
Xander's Facts. There you go. Imagine
Wow.
if that happened, actually. That would be insane.
I mean, I would like it. I like watching Embiid play. I just
It's
it,
it's very
it would
reliant
be remarkable
on,
for him to have a good playoffs. He's never done it
yeah, it's
before.
that's the
And he's
thing.
what, 31. People that big don't tend to get better as they get into their 30s, but you
That's
know,
the thing. It's reliant on him being good in the playoffs and being healthy.
yeah.
So
But everybody's
definitely.
got stuff they're relying on. You know, the Celtics are probably the safest team. But if Porzingis is not right, which a 7'3" guy coming off a foot injury that's taking half the season, there's every reason to think that could happen. Yeah, Celtics could be vulnerable.
There's a couple teams in the East. All right, I want to hear yours, Hillbilly. Who you got?
So in the East, I am going to go with the Knicks.
Wow. Okay,
I
that's
just
juicy.
I think that they've got a couple of years of runway here, and I'm just being a little contrarian. I mean, the Celtics, I think, probably do have the best chance of making it to the finals, but yeah, I don't want to pick them, and I think there is a legitimate question with it, and I think the Knicks are going to be really good. I mean, they've got, you know, Mikal, like I said before, Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, that is almost unfair on wing defense, how good that is. And if Jalen Brunson, I don't know, there's something about that guy. Like, you put that kind of team around him, it's much better than it was last year. If they're healthy, I could just see him do it. And
Before you
then
make your West pick, I mean, the thing, like, if the Knicks are in the finals and you got Jalen Brunson going off at MSG, I mean, that would be a sight to behold, honestly.
it would be great. And I just, for some reason, I could see it happening. I think Brunson just kind of has that lightning in the bottle where you can't stop him from scoring. And they just, I mean, last year they just ran out of gas. They had no players left to play. So just hopefully they have better health this year. So then in the West, I'm gonna, you know, last year, if you remember in the preseason, I was super high on OKC. And I wanted to predict that they were going to do even better than I was saying, but I just felt like that was reaching too far. Like I think I did say that they had like a chance to be the best team in the West. They could be that good. But I certainly wasn't picking it to happen. And
No.
obviously that was a mistake because they were the number one team in the as far as the regular season goes. And you know, this year like I'm a little hesitant cuz they're still so incredibly young to think that they're going to make it all the way to the finals. But, you know, they would be the youngest team to make it to the finals since the last OKC team that did it, you know, which, because you remember Durant and Harden and Westbrook and Ibaka, they were all super, super young.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not going to underpick them again. I think they have everything that they need. They don't really have any holes on their team. They can withstand injuries better than anyone. And I think that Shea Gilgeous just kind of has that type of game where he can just get in the lane and get a shot almost anytime he wants. And in the playoffs, that's just so valuable. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting, but I think they're probably going to be. And then God help us all when they get Cooper Flag in the draft.
They're in the finals. Let's just, get the number one pick,
Yeah, I mean, just to think that that's an actual realistic possibility probably won't happen, but you know, it's a real possibility is something to think about. And then in the finals, I'm going to go with OKC winning over the Knicks because I think that the Knicks will be out of gas by that time.
So, yeah. Thunder as champion for Hillbilly, I've got the 76ers. I think this will actually, you know what? I'll give you one because I think that I'll do Shea for MVP. I'll go with that. Like I think he's going to continue on his trajectory, and he was incredible last year. And the only reason that he didn't win was because you have Jokic up there. So I'm going to go with Shea for MVP. Do you have an MVP pick just off the top of your head?
I think Shea's going to come in second again this year. I think everything is so set up for Luka.
Mm.
I mean, last year what did he score? Like 33 points a game, almost averaging a triple double. And just, he's a force of nature out there. You just can't stop him on offense. And all they did was give him more weapons, like just, and like I said before, I know Klay Thompson's going to be a bit of a liability on defense, but having him as somebody that a defender has to stay home on because they're very dangerous as a catch and shoot, it just gives Luka more room to operate. Lively is like having one of the ways that Dallas is so good is that they have both Lively and Gafford that are really good lob threats, which just introduces that vertical element to Luka where he can just, you always have to be worried about him doing that because he's so good. I wouldn't be surprised if he averages a triple double, kind of like Westbrook, but a much more productive and good triple double average than Westbrook did it. And I'll pick Luka as the MVP.
Well, I definitely see that. I mean, he was only 0.2 assists per game away from averaging 10 last year. So it's like he's kind of right there.
What was his rebounds? 9.2.
Oh,
Which, so yeah, I mean, if he has a better year, which Luka's still, he's not an old player. I mean, I think he's got a lot of miles on him, but there's still every reason to think that he's only going to get better. I mean, he's going to be 25 for most of the season.
Yeah. All right, Hillbilly. I'm excited about this NBA season. It's kind of crept up on us, I think, a little bit. But
yep. Well, Tuesday night, right?
Tuesday night, it'll be presumably the beginning of the final NBA on TNT season, actually.
Yeah,
So
I think that's pretty much a definite now.
I think so. That'll be a little sad, but it means that the NBA is getting a lot more money, which I'm sure all the players will be very excited about, and the league too. But I think before we go, just to kind of like, this is the thought that I had just doing all this research for this podcast and stuff as we head into the season. And we've talked about it because, ever since we've started doing this 5 years ago, it's been, I'm pretty sure, a different team winning the title every year. And before that, we had the Warriors and the Cavs. And before that, we had the Heat and the Spurs or the Thunder. And it's like right now, it just feels so wide open. And there's, a bunch of articles going on out there that are just like, this is the most parity the league has ever seen. It's like anybody could win. And I think you see that from our predictions. And I think there may be a team or two, the Thunder, I think certainly could be that team who, if they elevate themselves and excel, that the parity could be over and they could just dominate for a couple years. Or the Celtics, even if they decide to, go back to back. But right now, it's like the league is like totally wide open. There's a couple different teams at the top who have a legitimate chance, I think, of actually competing and winning the title.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think parity is here. I mean, the Celtics, like they obviously have a very good chance of winning the championship this year, but the window probably closes after that. They've got really hard financial decisions to make after that. It's really only OKC that's set up for longer than that, which is great. I mean, it's great for the league. I mean, think about how much the Milwaukee fan base has expanded because of the championship that they had, and Denver's. Like it's great for everybody that your team, it doesn't have to just be in LA or Boston. And they have a real chance. It's a really good time for the league.
There you go. All right, Hillbilly. Well, that is our 2024-25 NBA season preview with our Zander's Facts chief NBA analyst, Hillbilly. I know he is smiling ear to ear when he hears that promotion.
Super excited.
It's lovely. Hillbilly, thanks again for coming on the Facts, spreading all your basketball knowledge.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for the promotion.
Zander's Facts.
And that is a wrap on episode 141. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of Zander's Facts. Thanks again to Hillbilly, our Zander's Facts chief NBA analyst, for coming on Zander's Facts. And we are going to have more videos coming out in the near future, so make sure to be on the lookout. And just because you all made it through this episode with my janky audio, I'm just going to give y'all a little bit of a treat and say that we are going to have an episode previewing the 2024 election here in the United States coming up in the next few weeks. Be sure to be on the lookout for that, because that's going to be a good one, I would say. And as always, make sure to follow our social media channels at Zander's Facts. You can subscribe to our YouTube page if you're watching on YouTube, and make sure to follow Zander's Facts if you're listening to the podcast on your podcasting platform. That's it for me. I'm Zander. These have been the facts, and we'll see you next time.